Welcome to the Power of ERDC podcast. I'm your host, Tim Reeves. Sitting on the beach and watching the waves is something many of us envision as a dream vacation. But for a group of Marines and sailors, observing and counting those waves while estimating the speed and direction of the currents is a critical duty. It is a manual, time-consuming process that carries inherent risks and operational dangers. Those observations, which are part of the SURF observation process, are a critical component in the planning and execution of amphibious operations, whether for training or active combat missions. This process is now being revolutionized, accelerated, and improved through the work of ERDC in collaboration with the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine Corps. Join us to discuss the SURF observation mission, the physics at play, and the efforts to quickly deliver new capabilities to our military is Crystal Painter. Crystal is a research physical scientist with ERDC's Coastal and Hydraulics Laboratory and a key member of the Field Research Facility in Duck, North Carolina. Crystal, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, amphibious missions, whether for training or combat operations, and for some reason I'm having a terrible time saying that, both in the intro and in this question, face extreme hazards when moving from ship to shore. One of the most dangerous phases of that transit is the surf zone. Could you explain what the surf zone is and what makes it so dynamic and potentially dangerous?
Yeah, absolutely. So the surf zone is kind of what we think about when we think about the breaking waves along a coastline. So if you're going to the beach and you're looking out, you see a bunch of breaking waves in that what we call surf zone. And then, if there are surfers there, they're sitting just beyond the surf zone, so just outside of where the waves break. And so that is kind of the region where our waves, waves have been traveling across the ocean basins. And, if you're out at sea in a small boat or one of these surfers sitting outside, you'll just kind of be bobbing up and down as those waves, which are carrying energy, travel across the ocean. As soon as we get into shallower water, those waves don't have as much space underneath them, so they start to stand up taller. You'll notice this sitting on the beach. All of a sudden, the waves get steeper and bigger. And so that's because there's not enough space for them anymore underneath on the, where the water depth is. And so they start to get steep and become unstable and break. And as soon as they do this, they're no longer just traveling with energy, they're expending that energy in the surf zone. So all of a sudden now, instead of it kind of passing underneath you, if you've ever been in a surf, you playing in the waves, when a wave comes past you, that's a lot of moving water that's coming quickly, and it is going to push you with it. So whether that is as the wave is breaking, tumbling you around, or once it breaks, it's just moving a lot of energy and a lot of water, and that's where we get strong currents, rip currents, all sorts of really dynamic environments. So that's what can make it dangerous if you think about being a person in the surf zone or a vessel trying to transit through the surf zone. As soon as you get into that region where that water is moving so rapidly, you are susceptible to all those forces that are going in lots of different directions. So it can spin you around, turn you upside down, and be a pretty dangerous spot.
So it seems like it's an area of complete chaos at times. When you think of these nice waves crashing, but it's complete chaos underneath and around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's beautiful to watch, but there is a lot of force in a surf zone. So it can be pretty.
So the Field Research Facility and the research it supports has become a world leader in documenting, studying, and understanding the surf zone. What makes this facility, its capabilities, and the team so highly regarded in this particular area of coastal sciences?
So the Field Research Facility sits on the coastline in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And so we have a surf zone right at our fingertips to study. And we have been, the field research facility has been collecting data since the 1970s in the surf zone. And so we have a really long-standing record, one of the longest in the world, of surf zone processes. So you're measuring wave heights and currents and all sorts of processes with even sediment transport. And so that allows us to study and understand these processes, but it also means that we're really focused on and have a mission to make sure that we can collect quality data. And so with that, we're always, we have a field team that is an operations team that's always trying to modernize and improve how we do our data collection. So they have developed a handful of really bespoke technologies and amphibious vehicles to get into the surf zone and be able to stay in that dynamic environment and measure it. And then we can also start to think about and understand how we're collecting data and how we can survive, our technology can survive within the surf zone and still get quality data. So we have a longstanding record of ground truth data that's kind of, the best known way to collect data. But then we can also bring in new instrumentation and compare and try to measure using different techniques. How do we make it lighter? How do we, make it easier to deploy? And how does that line up with kind of the tried and true methods that we use? And it also provides the opportunity to compare to models. So we have, most coastal processes models, so forecasting conditions within the surf zone have all been tested at depth because it's a great place to get ground truth and validation. So our team has a lot of experience with that as well. And because of this great facility, it really fosters a lot of collaboration. So we work with industry and academia and other government labs. That's a great place for people to bring and test or, their technology or to test their different models. And so it fosters a lot of collaboration as well.
So for our audience, you can visit powerofverdictpodcast.org. And from there, we'll share some images of, I think, some of those vessels and technologies that you were mentioning, such as the Lark and the Crab, which are, I hate to say very unique, because if they're unique, but very unique in their, not only their appearance, but their capabilities. And we'll make sure we share some information about those two particular vessels on the website there. So make sure to look out for that. So currently, amphibious operations are supported by manual surf observations conducted by Marines and sailors ahead of any landings. This is a labor-intensive process. Can you explain briefly how those surf observations are conducted and what data these Marines and sailors are trying to collect?
Yeah, absolutely. So the surf observation, which you might hear me call the SUROB, which is just kind of that shortened acronym that's used for it.
We like
And so
acronyms, so yeah. So
So that SUROB collection is done by somebody sitting on the beach. And this is really, if you're going to have people or vessels moving through the surf zone, you really want to make sure that you understand what those conditions are like. And so this is kind of traditionally how it has been done. And so you have a Marine that sits on the beach and you start out by counting 100 waves and you are estimating the wave height of those as well as the type of breaking wave. So when that wave breaks, is it kind of a spilling, what we call spilling wave, where kind of just slowly the water falls down that steeper slope, or is it a plunging wave, which is kind of what you think of like a surfer, where it gets the water actually just pitches totally out and goes into free fall. And the difference of how waves break will change the forces that you feel if you were to be, under that wave or in that surf zone. So they're measuring how these waves are breaking as well as the height that they're breaking. And I should correct myself. They're not necessarily measuring them. They're just sitting on the beach and estimating kind of what they are seeing and recording it. They do 100 waves because, surf zones we're not in a wave pool where every single wave is the same. And so there's a lot of variability from wave to wave, and 100 waves helps us capture and be able to give, some statistics that help describe the surf zone more reliably. Then they're also going to be doing estimates of wind speed and direction, and understanding the littoral current or surf zone current, which is hard to measure sometimes. So the way that they usually do it is they'll throw a tennis ball or, a water bottle with a chem light in it or a, glow stick in it. So if they're at night, they can see. And then they're just going to let it drift in the surf zone and kind of keep track of time and then see how far along the beach it goes. And that's what they do to get an estimate of current. Something I'll note about that, it can be really challenging to, make sure that you can throw that ball exactly where in the surf zone you want to be measuring those currents. So you kind of end up getting, whatever you can get. And let's see, they're also going to be measuring the time between waves. So that's the wave period. How long is there between each breaking wave? And is there a directionality to where the waves are coming from? So they collect all this information. They're recording it all on their piece of paper. And then they have these lookup tables that they use to kind of map those metrics to calculate what is called the modified surf index. And that is just kind of a unitless number that's supposed to describe how challenging it will be to transit through a surf zone. So you want to understand kind of these other parameters that describe what is going to be challenging and then, bake it down to just hard or easy, essentially, with the modified surf index.
And this information goes back to decision makers who are offshore or somewhere else who can say that these amphibious vehicles and vessels can go from ship to shore, or they can't go from ship to shore, or so kind of gives them that go, no-go decision process.
Yeah, exactly. So it provides that, different, depending on what type of vessel, depending on where they are. And there's a little bit of a wiggle room, but they'll have like thresholds of what they are comfortable going through. And so the surf can change as the waves travel, it can be very calm. And in a couple hours, the conditions can change rapidly. So they want to be kind of constantly, or at least every hour, collecting this information so that you can confirm that the conditions aren't getting worse and that they fall within the threshold of safety.
So in recent years, ERDC, in collaboration with the Office of Naval Research and the U.S. Marine Corps, has focused on rendering or making these SUROBs faster, more accurate, and easier to collect. What are some of the tools and techniques that have been developed recently in support of this effort?
Yeah, so this effort, the Office of Naval Research kind of put out a call that they wanted to improve, the information available to support decision makers in this and to make sure that there's good awareness of the surf zone conditions. And so the team at ERDC has done a handful of polling technologies that were already being worked on and you know, meeting with and learning from the Marines and developing some new things that can kind of pull together and specifically address the Marine Corps needs. So there's actually quite a lot of technologies that are going into the surf observation tool. So the first I'll mention is the littoral imaging system. And this is actually just a software package that uses UAS, or a small drone, aerial drone imagery to, so you collect some imagery and then you process that through the software and it will provide you estimates of all of these surf parameters we just talked about. And it will also give you an estimate of the water depth map underneath and some aerial, we have different image products that help support kind of understanding the surf zone. And so something that's really helpful about this platform is that now, instead of just somebody sitting on the beach doing an observation right out in front of them and, writing down the lat long of where they are, we actually have a spatial map. So you can now see, the water depths in an area. You can look at the imagery of where those waves are breaking, and you also get spatial currents. So instead of just, throwing a tennis ball and writing down a number of the wave, the current speed, you can see that spatially where you are getting stronger currents and in what direction they're flowing. So that's one of the tools. And I should say, like, the surf observation tool itself was designed to be a system of systems. So it's not one technology. It's how can we pull together all sorts of different technologies that support understanding the surf zone and can create flexibility depending on the Marine's mission set to use to collect. So we have also been working with some COTS, commercial off-the-shelf in-water sensors. So we have the GiaBot, and what we're doing there is there's a great team at ERDC that is working on developing additional software that will help process. So that's a small It's a couple feet long surface vessel that can, what we like to call surf survivable. So it's, a lot of technologies don't want to be in the surf zone. This one can operate pretty well in the surf zone. So it allows us to be in the environment we want to measure. But now we're starting to develop the behaviors that we need and the software packages that we need to actually process data and extract surf information out of that platform. So now can we measure, the littoral currents in a way that instead of throwing the tennis ball and hoping that it lands where we want, we can tell the system where we would like to measure currents, and it can just go to that spot and then drift, and we can get a better measurement of currents exactly where we want it. That's an example. So we also have, we're right now talking about observing surf while you're out there. But, kind of before we get to the beach, they want to have a forecast, right? So we have what we call the littoral planning tool, and that's a web CAC enabled, a web tool that is, protected for the DoD users, and that will provide a surf forecast for them and, give them those same parameters that they can then get onto the beach and improve once they get to collect data. So the only kind of new technology that we have developed is our littoral fusion software, which will hopefully help you understand all this. I've mentioned a lot of different technologies, and you can imagine if you're a Marine, you're trying to figure out which one to use and what's going on. And so we tried to develop a software and a web application that can go on their tablets that pulls all of this together into one place. And so you go to one application, you can look at data from whatever platform you have chosen to collect from, and the software fusion runs in the background, and so it will update your forecast based on the observations you've collected. So we got a forecast yesterday, we're out on the beach today. That forecast might not be perfect, but if we can get additional collected information from on site, we can kind of update that forecast and continue to improve the information that is being provided to make decisions with.
So you mentioned COTS a minute ago. In previous episodes, we've discussed ERDC's ability to research and leverage these systems to advance civil works and military engineering efforts. How do you identify and evaluate these systems and know that they're going to help in that SUROB effort? And going back real quick to the Jayabot, I think you were trying to, it looks like a underwater rocket torpedo type thing. So we'll share some photos of that as well on the website. But how do y'all identify and kind of test these systems to know that they're going to be, one, get you good data, but two, like you said, survive a zone that is chaotic and energetic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I'll answer that in two parts. So how do we identify, what systems that we want to use and survive in the surf zone? That kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the field research facility being such an incredible test bed. So if somebody is trying to test their system, so a commercial entity or a government lab is trying to develop something, they probably will reach out and want to test it at the field research facility where we can, watch how it's behaving in the surf zone, see the quality of the data in an environment where we have other ground truth data to compare. So it's actually pretty common for folks to bring systems out to the field research facility and test them. And we also have sometimes efforts where we kind of do a call we're looking for different commercial off-the-shelf technologies. This is kind of something that's going on this year right now. We'll ask a handful of performers to bring their systems down, put them all in the water, and so we can evaluate how they're performing. And that helps us kind of determine, what the best platforms are. And I think what we really try to do with our group does not necessarily focus on developing hardware platforms ourselves. So we're, kind of pulling and seeing what people have. But what we're doing is trying to develop algorithms and processing software that will help get, even more quality data out of these systems. So if somebody can make it survive in the surf zone, we're going to work on trying to get better surf zone data out of it. And a lot of these algorithms and the software that we're developing can kind of be adjusted to different platforms, right? So it's all based on the kind of the physics and the environment that we are in. So it's not, we develop it for a specific platform. You might have to make some changes, but that kind of science and technology advancement could be moved to a different system. So it's not specific to those. And then the other thing I wanted to know is we talked about the Jayabot, the UAS platform, or the drone that is used to collect aerial imagery. That's also a commercial off-the-shelf system. And our software runs on 3 different commercial off-the-shelf systems. And so part of it is deciding, what's going to survive in the surf zone. But for that case where it's an aerial drone, it doesn't have to survive in in the surf zone. At that point, we then kind of turn it around and say, who's our end user and what do they have? And so the systems that we have used and the UAS that we have used, they have been chosen because they are already fielded to the Marine Corps. So what is the way that we can figure out what you already have fielded to you, what you are used to, what you have, and improve what it can do for you. So we can just give you software. You already have the system. And all of a sudden now, just by downloading our software, you'll be able to get this information. So we do spend a lot of time trying to make sure that, as we think through how we want to do development, we are trying to find the path of least resistance to get information and get new technology to our customer, which in this case was the Marines.
Yeah, and having just talked with you about this in another forum, the software developed is, usually is built into the tablets, like you mentioned earlier, that is already deployed, already used across the forces. That the app that's built that flows these things together is something they're familiar with. So it really is improving upon what they already have, what's already available, and so it's been interesting on our end to research this and learn about this, the work that y'all have done to make that much easier for the Marines and sailors who have to use it.
Yeah.
So my next question though is how, we talked a little bit about this, maybe some of the questions, but that feedback and that working alongside the Marines and sailors who have to use, who need to collect this data, who are transitioning from a very manual process, time-consuming process, to one that is, we expect and know, is much easier, efficient, faster, so forth, so and probably gives, and we know gives better data. How has that back and forth been in working with them in the field and along the shoreline?
Yeah, I think it's been really fun. Our team is really focused on making sure that what we develop is useful and user friendly. So we can develop the greatest tool ever, but if it does not fit into their workflow or doesn't work for them or they can't understand the products, then it's not useful. And so I think we really understand that, that's on us to make sure what we are developing is what they need. So, back to this initial call, we had spent a lot of time kind of pitching our ideas and talking to different Marines and stakeholders that we know to kind of make sure that we understood and we're kind of in the right lane of what, what are your biggest challenges? What are the sticking points? Like, what's the thing that you really want to address? And then we actually also hosted a end user focused workshop at the beginning of this development cycle. So we said, here's kind of the problem statement that we understand. Here's kind of our pitch of how we think we can address it. Here are open questions. And so we were able to, spend 2 days getting a bunch of feedback and iteration on what they wanted, learn a lot more about, the constraints that they are in when they are doing these collections. And then since then, we've had additional opportunities to, meet and provide, first iterations of our applications, get feedback on the visuals or the data display. Is it digestible? Iterate with them there. And then we've also gone to a handful of different exercises and demonstrations where we try to, do a quick training and hand the gear off to the Marines and let them use it. And so they're able to provide us feedback, but then we also just get it by noticing, ooh, they're struggling with this. We didn't make this clear, or this is a sticking point. So along our entire development pathway, we have had the opportunity to kind of put it in their hands and get a sense of how it's working, collect feedback, give a little bit of training and iterate on what we are providing.
So the development of these SUROB tools was not done in a silo. They are a product of significant coordination across ERDC involving teams from multiple laboratories. What other laboratories and teams contributed or have contributed and are contributing to this development process?
Yeah, so that's, I think, something that's so great about ERDC. We started understanding what the needs were from the Marines and the Office of Naval Research, and we have the coastal expertise within CHL, but the Coastal Hydraulics Laboratory. But we started to realize pretty quickly that one of the things that they wanted and needed was a application on their tablets. So, they can go download a new plugin, and they needed something that was user-friendly to help them collect their data, view and integrate their data. And so that wasn't something that our team had expertise in, but we could just reach out within ERDC. And so we were able to pull in, I think, 4 different folks across this project in different pieces of the tool itself, from the geospatial research laboratory and SUROB, which is the construction engineer research laboratory. And so we had 4 folks that were pulled in that have expertise in developing web applications, developing ATAC applications, so those tablet applications, all of the user interface stuff, displaying geospatial data, as well as helping us handle the networking. So we can one of the things that they helped us build was a mission planner for the JayaBot in-water sensors. So can you kind of go to the tablet, figure out what you want to tell the bot to do, and then helping us with that networking so that communication package gets to the JayaBot and it goes on and kind of does its collection.
So, and by the way, we had a previous episode of the podcast who met with that TAC team, and so our viewers and can go back and learn more about TAC and the capabilities within that system as well that this plugs into and this works with. So, my final question, Crystal, is as someone who does research and how does it, I guess, on a personal side, you see these tools and these systems that you've helped research and develop and stuff now being deployed and handed off to Marines for their use. How does that, on a professional and personal side, make you feel as you're able to see these things transition to those who need to use it?
It's really exciting. I think one of the reasons I came to ERDC is I've always been passionate about applied science and how do you get the science and new development into the hands of people that need it and kind of match that to end users and kind of move the needle forward. And so kind of going out and learning about what the Marines are doing and what they're struggling with and thinking, oh my gosh, we have so much that can help them is exciting, but sometimes frustrating. Like, we've got to get this to them. And so it's really exciting to see it kind of get over the finish line and get into their hands and be able to contribute and make a difference in their safety and their ability to do their jobs.
Well, Crystal, thank you so much for joining us today. We will have a lot of information on our website, poweroferdicpodcast.org, for this particular episode, and some additional resources, photos and such that we'll have for our audience to be able to learn more about SUROB, the surf observation process, and so forth. And so, again, thanks for joining us. To our audience, if you have any questions, you can email erdicinfo@usace.army.mil if you want some more information on this and other technologies. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.